Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Erin and I started this channel because I want to help other people like myself with eating disorders or any other mental health illness really to start a daily journaling practice that will help them heal the way mine has helped me. Let me start off by saying that I am not a mental health professional. Nope. Everything that you hear me talk about in my videos is drawn from personal experience. Let's get started with episode number 4 of this series, Starting Your Journaling Practice. Today, we're going to talk about throwing bleep at the wall. Throwing it at the wall. So, we're going to talk about all the things that I thought when I first started journaling and how I think that translates into how you need to experiment. What in the world am I talking about? Sometimes I ask myself the same thing. Today's video is about setting aside your fears. It's about letting yourself be open to trying new things, which can be, I know for myself it was a little bit unnerving. That's a lie. A lot unnerving. It was really hard to do. And if you find yourself in a situation like I was in, where you're maybe really critical of yourself, you maybe compare yourself to people a lot, if those are things that you struggle with, then this part is going to be a little bit challenging for you. When I first started my journaling practice, I was so afraid that somebody would find my journal and read it. Oh my gosh, and then they were going to judge what I thought and felt, and I was so afraid of what that would be like if they had a negative judgment of my thoughts and feelings. So first of all, let's address that. You know intellectually that nobody has a right to judge your thoughts and feelings, especially if you're writing them down in a personal place. So that's not your issue, that's theirs. But that doesn't make it any easier. Of course not. That's something that you're gonna have to work through. You're gonna have to find strategies that you can use to make sure that you feel confident that your thoughts and feelings are kept nice and private. I was also really afraid that if I wrote down what I was thinking and feeling, it would somehow make those thoughts and feelings more real. I had gotten really good at numbing the feelings and not addressing them at all. And that's part of the nature of my eating disorder. And if you're like me at all, then you might have some of those same fears. You might not even know that that's what you're afraid of, because I know that that wasn't what I was afraid of. It wasn't until I was struggling really hard to even put ink on paper or pencil on paper, and I had to sit down and think about why is this so hard? And yes, I was afraid of people reading what I was gonna write or seeing what I was gonna draw, but B, I was also really afraid that it would make my thoughts and feelings more real. And intellectually, I know that sounds, ridiculous, but that's just how I felt. And I had to work through that fear that it would make it more real. How did I do that? Well, for me, it happened because I forced myself to do it just a few times. And then later, when I was experiencing that again and I was too scared to write things down or draw, I went back in my journal and reviewed what I had been experiencing on the days that I missed from my journaling practice previously. So those days that I found it really difficult, what was going on those days? I'd look at the missing chunk from my journal and remember what was happening, and I started to realize, like, okay, I think I'm just, for some reason, not wanting to actually write it down. So yeah, I had a lot of talk with the therapist and all that jazz too, because Lord knows I'm not doing this on my own. I was afraid that I would do it wrong. I know, how can you do it wrong? I know, it might sound ridiculous, but if you're feeling that way, honey, you're not alone. I was afraid I would do it wrong. There is no right or wrong way to journal. So yeah, if you find yourself thinking that, just keep this video in your bookmarks and click on it so that I can remind you over and over again, there is no wrong way to journal. So when we talk about doing something right or doing something wrong, there's judgment in that, and there can't be any judgment in journaling. So as a chronic perfectionist, it can be a little bit difficult to get your mind wrapped around whether something is right or wrong and how that, no. The only way for you to really judge whether you're doing it right or wrong, if you were going to do that, would be to know exactly how your journal is supposed to be. And there's nobody in the world that can tell you exactly how your journal is supposed to be. Your journal is for you, so you get to decide how it's supposed to be. And to be quite honest with you, it's probably going to change from time to time because you're going to grow, you're going to experience new things, you're going to try new tools in your journaling, and so it's going to change over and over and over again. Okay, let's talk about zoning out. Sometimes I really need to zone out before I can let any words come out. And these are the days I find for myself anyway. These are the days when the words don't want to come out, when they're scary or they're hard or they're painful. It really helps me to zone out first so that I can quiet some of the chatter that goes on in my mind. So there's often with me, there are a lot of thoughts that could play on a loop, and it's not just one thought at a time. So it feels as though sometimes there are several thoughts banging around in there, and it's like this chatter in my head, and I cannot for the life of me on those days form a coherent sentence to write things down. So I find it helps me to just zone out. It kind of calms the chatter so that I can then start to feel what it is that I'm feeling that's causing the chatter in the first place. So to zone out, draw. It's drawing, it's doodling. It started with doodling, so yeah, just doodle. If you're not a doodler, I know that this might be a little bit challenging, but here's a thought for you. Every drawing starts with a line. Might be a curved line, might be a straight line, might be a wiggly line, but every drawing starts with a line. So that's all you have to do. The days when it's really hard, sit down with your journal. If you can't make a word come out, draw a line. Okay, you've set your timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is that you're shooting for establishing this journaling habit. Just draw lines. And if that line doesn't make you feel like you want to draw another one connected to it, don't draw another one connected to it. Just start drawing lines. And eventually what might happen is you might want to draw a different colored line. So you might pick up a different pencil. You might pick up a pen instead. And you're going to draw a line over here, over there. Before you know it, you're going to be either have a page full of lines. We call that abstract. Or you're going to have some form of something that you have started to draw. But ultimately what the goal is to be able to take your mind off of the chatter and focus on the page so that you can quiet the chatter. And you may or may not feel like writing at some point during this process, and that's fine. The important thing is we're starting a journaling practice, so we want to make it a habit. So even if you're just sitting down and you end up with a page full of lines, like I said a minute ago, you can't do it wrong. So it's the focus is on getting yourself into the place and opening the book and doing the thing for a few minutes every single day. Eventually, what we're hoping for is that you're going to start to feel like your day is not complete if you haven't done some form of self-reflection or journaling or grounding or self-care. There are other ways for you to get the words flowing if you're feeling stuck, and one of the most common ones is to use a journaling prompt. So what is that, you might ask? Well, a journaling prompt is a question or a sentence that you ask yourself with the intention of thinking deeper on the subject. So if it's a question, you might write the question in your journal, and then you might just spend a few minutes reflecting on your answer to that question. You can start writing the answer to the question, and then you're going to start asking yourself more questions about your answer to the question. We'll start going deeper into the layers and writing this all down if you can, and if you can't, think about it and doodle. As I mentioned, the prompt could also be a statement. So you might read a sentence and then just think about what that means to you and write down your thoughts. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not an essay. No one's going to grade it. So just write whatever words come to your mind. As a matter of fact, to help you out with that, I'm going to leave a couple of links to some great journaling prompts. I'll leave those in the description for this video. So on the times when you're feeling stuck, you'll have somewhere that you can go to. Now, some of the prompts that I'm going to link are specific to people who are suffering with eating disorders, but there will also be a link to more generic prompts that you can use no matter what it is that you're struggling with in the moment. Let's talk about gratitudes. This is another activity that you can do in your journal. Writing gratitudes has done a lot for me, and actually that's bled into outside of my journaling practice, I should say. And my husband and I will often share gratitudes with one another when we go to bed at night. It's just a really great way to get reflective and to think about what it is that is a part of your life that is important, to think about some things that are positive that might have happened to you or around you or for you that day, and just helps to remind you that there's always something good to be found. And sometimes, quite honestly, it's a little bit difficult, even for me now, to come up with gratitudes. I do 3. Some people do less, some people do more. Some days I have only been able to come up with 1 or 2. And honestly, some days those 1 or 2 gratitudes might have been, I put clothes on. I'm grateful that I was able to get out of bed and put on some clothes today, because some days that's a big step. Writing gratitudes are also a really great way to keep things into perspective. I struggle with comparison. I compare everything to everyone else's everything. And in today's age of social media, we all know that when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, quite often you're comparing your B-roll, or your behind the scenes, they call it, to somebody else's highlight reel, right? So you get to see the best of what everybody else wants to share about their life, and then you compare it to what you find to be the biggest flaws in yourself or your life, and you're setting yourself up for disaster, certainly. I find that writing down my gratitudes forces me to put comparison aside and focus more on just myself. So it's a really great tool for that as well. Something else you can do in your journal is recording accomplishments. Again, all of this stuff can be a bit of a struggle, and sometimes recording accomplishments for me has been a struggle. Some days I don't feel like I achieved anything, but if I'm committed to writing, 1, 2, 3, however many down every day, then I will sit down and try to think of things that I achieved that day that I can put in my journal. The key here is no judgment. You need to be able to just feel like you're being real with yourself, and that be gentle with yourself, and that if your accomplishment for today is not what you wanted it to be, or maybe not as extravagant or elaborate as what you achieved yesterday, that's okay. The important thing is to recognize that you have done something worthy of noting every single day. And again, some days that might be, I managed to leave the house. That's been a big struggle for me. I have suffered from a little bit of social anxiety. So some days leaving the house is a really big accomplishment. Going to the grocery store is a big one for me. That is a hard one for me, I tell you. And so quite often you'll find in my journal entries, an accomplishment will be going to the grocery store, and that might always feel like a big accomplishment for me. Who knows? But as long as I feel like it's an accomplishment, it's something that I can write in my journal that I accomplished something that day. Another thing to remember about accomplishments is they don't have to be huge. So there's nothing wrong with having like a huge goal that you're working towards. For example, for me, it would be to be able to say I'm fully recovered. Now that's something it's huge, and it's not something that's going to happen quickly. It's something that's going to take a long time for me to achieve. Nobody can put a date on it either. So for me to say that I can't find an accomplishment because I haven't reached that goal yet is just setting myself up for disappointment. So rather than do that, what I do is focus on the small steps that I have to take to get to that goal. Nobody reaches their, lifetime accomplishment in a day. Nobody reaches it in one step. There's little steps that go along the way. So if you're working towards something in the far off future, it's fine to keep that in mind, but try not to set yourself up for disappointment in expecting yourself to be able to write that big massive goal down on X day. That might not happen. So you want to record all of the little steps you're taking along the way to achieve that big goal. That's going to help you too when you're reviewing your entries, when you're looking back to see how things have gone in the past. I find it, for me, it's helpful to go back and look at the goals that I've set and accomplishments that I've achieved, so that I can remember and remind myself that I'm actually making progress in those moments that feels like I'm not making any progress. And speaking of goals, it's important to set goals. I think it's important for me. It's been important for my recovery. And I have, the long-term goals, but I also have little goals. And sometimes I can find it helpful in recognizing accomplishments if I'm able to set myself some really achievable, smaller goals for every day. So if I sit down and write, I've done my journaling practice in the mornings, I've done my journaling practice in the evenings, and I change it up depending upon what's going on and how I'm feeling really at a certain point in my recovery and in my life. But if I'm journaling in the morning, I will write down my gratitudes when looking back at the previous day. I will write down my accomplishments, again, looking back at the previous day, but my goals will be for that day. So I'll focus on what it is that I'm really hoping that I can achieve that day, what I'm practicing and what I'm working on. If I'm doing my journaling in the evening, I'll look back at the day to focus on my gratitudes and my accomplishments, but I will write down my goals for the following day. So I'll look at what I want to achieve the next day, what next steps I need to be working on to recover or to achieve whatever it is that I'm trying to achieve as that big long-term end goal. But remember, the baby steps that you're going to record on a day-to-day basis they're just as important as the big goal, because you'll never get to the big goal by skipping over the baby steps. You gotta do all the little steps, do all the work to get to the big goal. Another point about reviewing what your entries have been on past days in terms of goal setting is when you can look back at a previous day or previous days to see what you have been able to achieve. I know for me, sometimes that makes me feel on future dates, that will make me feel like, oh, well, I did that and it wasn't awful, so maybe I can do this other thing today that's just a little bit harder than that. So it's kind of like moving the goalpost for the goal. You just keep moving it a little bit every day. Next week's video will be our last one of this series. I'm super excited for next week's because there's some interesting things that I've found about habit forming, and I'm going to share some of those ideas with you. If you're really enjoying this video series, then I encourage you to click the red subscribe button below so that you don't miss any of my future videos in this series or in the next one that's coming up that I have already got planned and I'm really excited about. And if you just can't seem to get enough, then you can find links to my Instagram, my Facebook, and my website in the description for this video. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next video.